I usually try and follow the discussion that's going on Reddit and the forums, and maybe put up the next slide. And one of the main discussions there has been the DPS system, so I thought I would investigate that a little bit and show you some statistics on it. So with the main question,
this is what I want stats
DPS or dynamic bounty system ruin nullsec rating? So here we have a graph showing the total daily bounty generated across all of EVE.
That's a fact.
We can immediately see the drop that happened during the blackout period, where we saw a 4-fold decrease in the total bounty generated. It recovered quite quickly, but not exactly to the levels it was before. And then we had the dynamic bounty system period, where it dropped again nearly 50%. So you get,
That's really cool.
If we just look at this graph, we can conclude that the dynamic bounty system did indeed reduce total bounty by a lot and maybe even ruined rating. But if we give ourselves a little bit more historical context, we can see that the total amount of bounty that's been generated in EVE Online now is just the same as it was during the period 2012 to 2016. So this changes this perspective a bit. Maybe the period before the dynamic bounty system is the period of overpowered bounty in EVE Online.
I don't like that at all. That's not.
Let's focus on a period after.
Hold on, there's an explanation for. Oh,
zoom in on that period.
Hold on.
And in the middle of the time frame, we have the release of the.
Hold on. I don't like that at all. I don't like that at all because there's another explanation.
Total bounty by a lot and maybe even ruined rating. But if we give ourselves a little bit more historical context,
that's not historical context. That's out of context.
The amount of bounty that's been generated in EVE Online now is just the same as it was.
In this time period, if you were ratting in a carrier in Providence, you'd be kicked out. If you were ratting if you were carrier ratting in a lot of alliances, you'd be kicked out. It was considered to be stupid to be capital ratting. Capital ratting is still a thing now. Like, to compare the two seems really weird. Because, like, our capability of ratting and therefore the throughput. Yeah, exactly. Ratting would have been so much like just the raw ratting would be so much lower back then. I don't like that.
During the period 2012 to 2016. So this changes this perspective a bit. Maybe the period before the dynamic bounty system is the period of overpowered bounty in EVE Online. But let's focus on a period after the blackout. So zoom in on that period. And in the middle of the time frame, we have the release of the DPS system. We can split this up even further by security band and see that
I was just using
most of the bounty is being generated in nullsec. The green area is showing nullsec, the red area is showing highsec, and the purple area is showing lowsec. What is interesting here is to see that we actually have some activity in lowsec now.
Right, that makes sense.
After the release of the DPS system, we see a 3-fold increase in total bounty. Some of it is, of course, due to the fact that the bounty risk modifier is just increasing the total bounty.
Right, that's why.
But if we look at the number of kills, or NPC kills in lowsec, that has increased by 30% in that period. But because the dynamic bounty system mostly affected nullsec, let's just focus on that. And let's look at how it's split now between the main banks, the main bank auto payments, which is the payment you get from the main bank if you're NPCing, and the thefts of the main bank. And we can see that main banks are not being robbed that much. In fact, the probability of your main bank being robbed is only about 5%. And now we also have a new risk source, which is the reserve banks. And those are sitting at 50 billion a day now. But this only covers the total bounty. What about the distribution?
That's a big yellow area.
This graph shows all the systems. Each bubble there represents one system, and the size of the bubble is the amount of bounty that's generated within that system. This is pre-DPS. We can see that there are 2 sections within the universe that are responsible for most of the bounty generated. Now, if we take all these systems and split them equally in equal buckets of 100,
Not just carriers, but also V&I
From
ratting
the
became a thing in
lowest-
2016 a lot more.
From those systems that generate the lowest amount of bounty to those that generate the highest amount of bounty. You can see that the top 1% of systems, 33 systems, generated 12.4% of all the bounty. That's 250 billion a day for 33 systems.
This is before.
Now, after the release of the DPS system, we can actually see some activity in the bottom 50% of systems. But the top 1% is still quite high at 11.7%. So it didn't drop the 1% that much. But the next 15% of systems, those were really affected by the DPS. Now, if we make this graph cumulative, in order to see how many systems we would need to generate as much bounty as the top 1%, we can see before the release of the DPS system, we would need the bottom 72% of systems to generate as much bounty as the 1%. But after the release, we are at 55%. Now I wanted to investigate this a little bit further. Here we're looking at how much bounty is being generated by security status of the system. I've adjusted for the number of systems within each bucket. And we can see that it's a downward slope there. And the main idea behind this graph is to try and gain some insight on how much better you're off in deep nullsec versus closer to lowsec. And we can see that you're about 10 times better off in deep nullsec. But if we look at what happens after the release of the DPS system, now you're about 2 to 3 times better off. Now, what is the correct factor here? I'm not sure, but 10 sounds a bit off.
Does it?
Now, so far, we have covered the total bounty and the distribution in the universe. What about the ship types affected by the DPS change? So here we have the Dominics, the total bounty generated by the Dominics.
Odd choice.
It has decreased or started decreasing prior to the DPS release. And we can see it was slightly affected by the DPS release, but not that much. Next, we have the rattlesnake.
Did the dread things give bounties?
It was highly affected, and I wonder if people thought it was an over-investment, ratting in a rattlesnake. Next, there are the 2 carriers.
Wait. When did the faction ship change happen? Wasn't that also around that same time? Like the industry changes? That made it so faction ships like couldn't be built anymore, and battleships were a pain in the butt too? Okay.
So the Thanatos and the Nidhugger, those were both heavily affected by the DPS change. And then we have the supercarriers. Those both saw a huge drop, both during the surgical strike patch, which was April 2020, and also during the DPS release. And then finally, we have the Gila and the Ishtar.
Oh, see, the Ishtar wouldn't have been affected. So,
and
yeah.
currently, Ishtar is
By
generating
the
about
industry
half of the bounty.
Which is probably why the
nullsec.
industry, maybe the industry changes is where the Ishtar pumps
Which
back
I'm
up.
sure we would all like to see a little more
I'd have to go check.
diversity in the total in the ships used. But if we now transition this graph to see how many characters
Right,
are
but
behind this.
it's the difference between whether or not they keep
transition
getting
it to
built.
total bounty per character per day. Here I'm trying to mimic something closely related to ISK per hour, but it's not ISK per hour, it's per character per day. We can see that the Hel and the Nyx, they had their bounty reduced by about 44% after the release of the DPS patch. And we can even see that the surgical strike patch, which we saw
Calling
earlier,
matters
dropped
bots is just derogatory
both
term.
supercarriers by a lot, didn't really affect the ISK that they make, just the number of characters behind it. Then we have the Thanatos and the Nidhugger. Those both saw a 21% decrease. And the Ishtar saw about 11% decrease. Now, if we also consider it that there's less ISK to be made in the universe now, And the ISTAR as a proportion
Okay, I gotta
of
know.
the total.
I gotta look this up. Hold on. When is the industry changes happen? Eve Online industry changes. Significant update to industry. March 26, 2021. March, April, May, June, March, April, May, June. Okay. So January, February, March. So around here. So yeah, no, never mind.
Total ISK that is being generated, then the ISTAR is
that
not
doesn't seem to
worse
actually have an
off
effect. Interesting.
at the moment. Now, we can also look at the proportion of ISK generated by ship category. And I've increased the time frame a bit here. Now we're looking at all the way back to 2017. And we can see today, it's mostly just sub-capital ships that are generating the ISK. We got the super capitals, pre-DPS,
I find it really surprising that it
which
actually
were
didn't
about
reduce
28%
by
of
having
the
all those
total
ships
bounty
not be able to be
generated
built
by the
anymore.
super capitals. Now, more interestingly, during the blackout period, super capitals were responsible for 45% of the total ISK generation, which means that not all ships were affected equally during the blackout period.
Well, yeah.
Which begs the question, were super capital pilots or super carrier pilots playing the game of low risk, high reward during that period? Or even during the period just before the release of the DPS system? Now we can also transition this graph to see how many characters are behind this. You can see that there are not that many characters behind the sub-capital group, but still they're generating most of this there before the release of the DPS patch. So if you summarize this, the effects of the DPS patch, the ISK dropped from 1.7 trillion a day to 1 trillion a day. And it's now at the same
So
level
yes, the
as
answer
it
to
was
the
in
original question is
2012
yes.
2016. The ISK is now generated or it's more distributed across the universe. And those that were affected the most heavily by the DPS system are the super capital pilots, while the sub-capital pilots didn't really
event
see
running in
that much
low-sec
effect.
is a thing.
And low-sec ratting seems to be a thing now. Now, to finish this section, I want to show some statistics on the ESS system. So here's the average auto payment from ESS. Here's the average main bank theft, sitting at 50 million. And this is the largest main bank theft so far, 1.7 billion. And the average reserve bank theft, similar amount. And then there is the largest auto payment. Someone managed to get 2.5 billion from an autobank payment. And then the largest reserve bank theft at 10 billion.
Glorification of fit, mortification of fit. Oh, 7 of you, thank you for that raid. You, EVTC, are glorified. Go ahead and make sure that you give him an old follow. SO Eve TC. Boom. We are just we're going through the stats portion. We're listening to a justification as to why DBS is good, actually.
And then the amount that is currently in all reserve banks.
Somebody's like, if the reserve bank has money, I'm like, dude, the reserve banks have so much money compared to what we were able to take out of them.
Sitting at 50 trillion, estimated to be 77 trillion by the end of the year. For anyone to grab? Not exactly. You need the keys.
Yeah, that's the key. It's the
thank you, everyone.
It's the keys.
Now I want to welcome CCP Björn on the stage to talk a little bit about you guys.
Hello, everyone.
God, I
Do
love
I have
this one.
audio? You hear me? It's great to be here. Super happy to finally be here after.
The keys come from the SCC sites, which are the sites in LowSec that are locked out to 3 and take like Marauders basically. So 3 Marauders or Black Ops or maybe T3 cruisers can run them, and they get the reserve bank key, and then you take it tells you which quadrant of nullsec the key is useful for.
After the break, Fanfest has always been a highlight of for me working at CCP, and 3 years without Fanfest and 2 years without any events is a bit long. So super happy to be here. Now, a professional actress came to CCP before Fanfest and was like teaching us how to do these types of presentations, and she emphasized that it was very important to start big. So that's what I'm going to do. With a big ass 3D pie.
Did she say that it's best to explain it all?
It's also like a huge no-no in the analytical world to use pie charts, especially 3D pies. So it's been a bucket list item for me to be able to use this in a presentation for a long time. And but it also illustrates the point nicely. You, the attendees at Fanfest 2022,
well, those sites have
make
been
up
in the game
roughly
for like a year now, but they're only
of
in
the
NorSec.
active player base. When I pulled this data almost a week ago, you were standing at 831 players, 6,542 accounts, and 13,681 characters.
So let's extrapolate that for just a second. Now, obviously, the people in FanFest are going to be like some of the more active people, but somebody with a calculator, 13,000 divided by, I mean, like that's an average of 13 characters per player, right? Well, I mean, even if you go with accounts, that's like, call it 7, compared to the 2.5 it was when Quant told us last time.
He might have a calculator.
Hold on. What was that?
He might have a calculator on stage.
Fair enough.
So as I mentioned, you make up 0.3% of all currently active players, but you make up 0.9% of all active accounts, or like the accounts belonging to those active players rather, and 1.1% of all their characters. So as you can see, you have a lot more accounts on average, and you have a lot more characters than the average EVE player. 3.8 times more characters, in fact.
Right.
Now, you have character members in 2% of all active player corporations, which is already kind of a lot. But you have character members in 13.4% of all active player alliances, which is staggering.
Well, there's less alliances than
and
characters.
even more crazily, you have active character members in 29 out of the 30 largest alliances in EVE Online. However, you don't exactly follow the overall membership trends to the letter. The orange line here represents the amounts of characters you have in each of these alliances, while the black bars underneath.
I want to hold on. Now I want to take this stat to the one that they gave in the open, where they talk about how many people come from each one, because there's twice as many human beings from Goonswarm Federation at FanFest than anyone else. I remember that because like the next one was 50 something and Goonswarm was 101, and Pandemic Horde has 585 to Goonswarm's 429. So we know who the altaholics are, I guess.
Are the same as we had before. So Brave United and Pandemic Legion brought a disproportionate amount to FanFest, which is awesome. Now, talking alliances, we got a special request to remake this graph. So here you go. The higher you go up on this graph, like each star on the graph indicates an alliance. The higher you go, the more total lock-on time on average the member of the alliance have.
I wonder when this is as of, because I kind of want to see when this was done and whether or not Test Alliance still is where it shows.
And the further right you go, the more alts each member has on average. And the size indicates the player amount in each alliance, not the character count.
Test Alliance would be the falling
count.
Star in this case.
So you can let this sink in a little bit. And yeah, the orange ones are represented at FanFest. The blues are not. Here is a similar graph, but showing very different things. Instead of alliances, each star here represents a player at Fanfest. The higher you go, the older the player is. The more further to the right you go, the more log-on time you have on the most played character. On your most played
I bet you
character.
that distribution's like opposite.
So as you can see,
to the
you
normal
differ
player base.
quite a lot.
Most
You
people
are
being
as
younger.
different as you are many. And there are some quite staggering
261 alts.
alt counts and total play
You might
time
be the problem.
on the most played character. Now,
He didn't quite
here
say that correctly, though. This is
we
actually
see
account
every
age.
character in Evo.
Right. Yeah. What's the difference?
Well, he said player age, and I
Oh,
was like,
yeah,
our
yeah,
players
yeah.
aren't 19 years old.
right. Yeah. I guess I'd already interpreted that in my brain.
Yeah,
It's like
I think most people understood.
how
but, like, he
how
didn't
their
say it.
player's age in Eve.
Correct,
He says it as a player as opposed to any
Yeah.
given character from that player.
Right.
Now, here we see every character in EVE Online that has more than 100 hours of active game time since 2012.
That's a
It's the same graph really as before, except the axes have been flipped. So now, on the bottom axis, you have character age in years. On the y-axis, you have total log-on hours for that character of active time again. And you are represented in orange. So you kind of follow the distribution, but still you can also make out that you are a little further up, like on the you're in the higher echelons of players, definitely, when it comes to age and total log-on time. So yeah, most of you have actually spent quite an astonishing amount of time playing EVE, both in terms of tenure or active log-on time, or both. I remember when I reached 1,000 hours in a game I was playing, my friends actually threw me a party. It was such an achievement, and I'm not even kidding. I was probably also the first one to do it, and it was like a huge achievement. However, for 1,000 hours for you is more like a barrier to entry. And I would like to review some of your most played characters. Now, 71% of you have reached that 1,000 hour mark. 55% of you have more than 2,000 hours spent in the game. 22% of you have more than 5,000 hours. 9% have more than 7,500 hours of active playtime on your most played character. And 4.5% of you, or 38 players, have reached 10,000 hours of active game time on your most played character, which is often considered the amount of time you need to reach global expertise. You're like the very top of your field. 13 of you have 15,000 hours of active game time on your most played character. However, one absolute legend has spent a total of 23,776 active hours of game time, so removing idle log-on time, since 2012 on his most played character.
I was about to say.
And I think he
found the
deserves
AFK
a round
cloaker.
of an applause.
That's crazy.
And perhaps a report to the security team as well.
Couldn't be an AFK cloak.
No. Kidding.
What was that?
He can't be the AFK cloaker then, because it has to be active.
So somebody's saying he found the bot.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's almost 2.7 years of active playtime since, like, in the last 10 years, which is crazy.
The sun is
now you have started out in EVE in almost every year since EVE came out. Some of you have been with us from the very beginning, and some are at their very beginning in EVE. We actually have 5 players at Fanfest that started out on the day EVE was launched. Yeah. May 6, 2003, 19 years ago. But we also have some new players, which still have a little ways to go towards their 1,000-hour party, but I hope you will be there for them to show them the ropes, welcome them into the game with open arms and loaded guns, like you only know how to. But yeah, to the fun stuff, pew pew and exploding spaceships. Since 2007, late 2007, Fanfest 2022 attendees have been involved in 2.5 million PvP kills. In 85% of those kills, you are the aggressing party.
See, I mean, these stats are fun, but like they're about the population.
In 15% of those, you are the victims.
Oh.
And in 1.5, you are both. Which means that you guys, only the players at Fanfest, have killed each other 40,423 times. And you've potted each other 4,004 times. Which I would expect to be a little higher. It's like you're kind of nice to each other, just like, no, okay, job done, go. It's nice.
Yeah, when I first played, there were still people that like
now,
didn't pod because it's
even more
rude.
interestingly,
like, why else?
10% of these 40,423 deaths,
not true anymore.
One or more of the attackers also belongs to the victim player. And even more oddly, in 82% of those cases, the final blow is delivered by a character owned by the same player as owns the victim.
Somebody wants some
I
kill
have no
marks.
idea what you're doing. Is it like insurance fraud? Are you practicing? Are you juking the DPS system? Like, I have no idea what you're doing. And like, what the fuck happened in 2020?
One dude.
Like, I don't know. Very
I remember there was like a thing about people
since 2012,
like, purposely killing.
Shorten the time scale a little bit. You have killed 300,090. Wow, this is a difficult number. 393,847
was the first
characters,
hunt?
distinct
07.
characters.
Thank you for that, Frosty McNuggets.
Belonging to
10 months in a row, 12 months total.
278,392.
So the first hunt was in 2020? No. Wait. No, because that was 2021. No, the hunt with implants was 2021. Because this was the return of the hunt. I think. Let me double check.
$27? No.
This just has the event site.
2018?
Yeah, and then in 2021, yeah, 21 introduced the egg hunt, and because that's this year the egg hunt accidentally dropped last year's keys for a day or two. Although this one doesn't say anything about the potting and the implants, but I'm pretty sure it's 2021. That started that.
Players, almost 1.8 million times over, which means you have killed each character that has been killed by you has been killed 4.7 times on average.
No kidding, Rockin'.
Some a lot more than others. I resisted the urge to include the character names, but some poor fella has been killed 2,400 twice by you. Seems excessive, guys. Seems a bit
But
excessive.
is that the same person
Now, you have destroyed
himself?
stuff since 2012 worth 270 trillion ISK. And stuff worth 428 trillion has been dropped during PvP kills you've been involved in. Now, as just kind of to shape this, the average destruction value for even its entirety per day is 1.1 trillion.
Why would twice as much
so
drop
was destroyed?
This
is actually 8% of all total PvP-related destruction in EVE for the past 10 years. But you only make up 0.6% of the attacking characters.
Crimson Harvest?
Which is crazy. And only 10 years.
What am I doing?
So this kind of to shape this, the average destruction value for EVE in its entirety per day.
Right. But you would expect that what was destroyed would be a little bit more than half. Because half the stuff drops, half the stuff is destroyed, but the ship and rigs are also destroyed. So you would expect it to lean on destroyed over dropped.
Correct.
But even Loot Fairy would be 50-50. So this must be being skewed by
I
things
was a
like
bit
Wormhole.
confused.
This is Wormhole with Love and Crimson Harvest and stuff like that. It has, I mean, like, but that's a huge difference because of that. I don't know, man.
I was actually wondering if maybe he had gotten the numbers backwards, where it was
I believe that
dropped stuff or just. I don't know though. I don't know. I was actually confused about this one too.
That's interesting.
Trillion.
But the faction mods would 50-50.
This is
50% of the faction mods
8%
would also be destroyed.
Of all total
50% of the fighter stuff would be
destruction
destroyed.
in EVE for the past 10 years.
Yes, Loot Fairies.
But you only make up 0.6% of the attacking characters, which is crazy, and only 0.4% of the attacking players. So it seems that some people just want to watch the world burn. Yes, indeed. You have way more kills than the average player.
Right. That would make destruction be heavy.
8.4 times more. You also have way more deaths than the average player. 20 times that of an average player. Your KT ratio is still like 6, so you're fine, I would say. You tend to not go for low-value targets as much as the average player. You tend to go for higher value targets. And granted, these are not the most high value targets, but these are the categories where you differ the most from the overall. However, the kind of more staggering thing is, if you look at your percentage out of all the total kills per the highest value categories, you have killed 18% of all carriers destroyed in EVE for the past 10 years.
You can just summarize this by saying
of all Force Auxiliaries.
Nullsec is disproportionately represented at Fanfest.
Perhaps most staggering is that you have killed 64% of all Titans in EVE for the past 10 years. You've been involved in the kills.
In the same way, there's another 3 billion risk ratting that
crazy
dropped, that destroyed the two. Like,
now, I just want to sincerely thank you for all the activity you do in EVE Online. It's because of you and every action you make in game that I get to come to work and I get to analyze some of the craziest and complex data sets there are. Your creativity and your crazy kind of shenanigans in game
all these stats are kind of just a curiosity
blow my mind.
I've
been here for 10 years and it kind of amazes me that I can get surprised by you guys and what you get up to still. So yeah, thank you very much again. And you can see all your beautiful faces as I leave. Thank you.
Man, I would have liked all of those stats, but as the general EVE population.
Forgot one note. I'm going to let this run through.
Is that it?
Please join us at the roundtable at 3, where we'll be discussing all and everything data-related, Axel for EVE.
Yeah, basically.
Right. Yeah. Well, obviously it's aimed at attendees, but I mean, like, it basically, like, I felt like that kind of stats would be perfect for an opening ceremony or a closing ceremony, not a panel.
Yeah. Although those stats, in terms, you were absolutely correct. Those stats are really showing kind of the population, which part of the population of EVE comes to FanFest.
Right. Which, of course, would be the most invested people. Or you'd expect it to be.
Yeah. And that goes to show that we can't just go to FanFest and expect and hope that that's where we're going to get a lot of our feedback from.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's Patriot's principle at that point. Is you've got you're staring at the selection bias. effectively.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And if any dev looks at this and doesn't realize that, then we need to be careful of that dev.
And I guess my other thing is like there's that one huge outlier, and like I said, we don't know. It seems obvious that something happened that seemed manipulated, and so having like that one
Outliers,
thing seemed to have like made all of the other information. Like it would have been nice to strip that one person out to make it so that we could see the other details a little bit more better. But
however, a lot of times though they do check these stats beforehand to make sure that there isn't any weirdness going on, although it may or may not have, like, you know, because of all the stats, all of the things that they look through, some stuff may slip through that they didn't.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, this felt like it was more like just a fun little thing as opposed to like I said,
True.
I'm never going to come back to this exact presentation and cite it for anything, right?
Yeah.
The first part I would.
Prior to this.
Yeah. The first half, absolutely. But this one, but that presentation is just like, hey, this is some fun facts about the people who are here. So
yeah, but I was super hyped about the DPS stuff because actually there was somebody in one of the other chats, maybe it was in your chat, I can't remember, but he was talking about like the BRM, DBS, and all that kind of stuff, and and I think that he would have been very interested to see this. Now it doesn't. I don't think that for him in particular it justifies BRM, DBS, etc., all those things that are sort of cutting into his profits. But it does kind of give context to what was going on and what we were seeing from the development side of things.
Right. Although I would argue that CSB Larkin's video presentation did a far better job of making that striking observation when it came to the roll calls. Like that in my opinion was well presented. You look at that and you go, oh, okay, yeah, that's something, right? Like, I mean, he did a really good, and I mean, CSB Larkin is consistently amazingly good at doing that. He's really good at using the stats to tell a story that is counter to the player's narrative. Like that is one thing he is good at knocking out of the park every single time.